in the school when she, there's a pile of vomit. And he was like, yeah, we should hang out, but seriously, we should do that. And she just kind of dead face stared at him and was like, okay, so the puke. But it was never like super, like there were a couple lines that were like super crass, but it was always in like this is just kind of how he thought it was to be cool. Almost to the same extent, with Cobra Kai out now, someone living in the past, Johnny Lawrence, how he talks to people and talks to women, it's kind of the same thing, like the babes and the, just all that stuff, super hot, be a badass. It's kind of the same thing. It's them, this is what worked for them at one point or worked for people that they idolized. So they adopted that into their character and just kind of held on to it for dear life.
No, you're right. And it's just, I gotta say that hot dog scene. So I listen to both commentaries on this movie. Dennie Gordon does one, and David Spade does one. His isn't so good. He kind of complains a lot. But we were listening to Dennie Gordon speak, and you look at her on IMDb. She did Waco, Legion. She's just directing major shows right now, TV shows, major. She's stayed busy in the industry. And my wife was working, and she was hearing her talk, and my wife's like, she's really smart. And we both just sort of sat there listening to Denny talk. But that's the one who said it was for a 13-year-old. But during that hot dog scene, you can see a kid throws it, and it just whacks Spade in his dirtays.
Oh, and the nethers, yeah.
Yeah, and he just dropped. And another one hit him right in the ear. And he said they had to stop production for 5 minutes while they looked at his ear. I'm like, a hot dog hit you, Spade. Come on, man.
Yeah, man up. There were certain scenes. The hot dog scene was one of them. When the septic tank gets cracked open, and just his reactions. Like, one, I think, how long did they just let the cameras roll in this scene, especially with that gunk getting all over him? And number two, how many takes did that require? How many angles did they have to do, and how many times did he just have to get covered with the poo?
Well, interestingly enough, they only had 28 days to shoot this movie. And so they had a budget of around $13 million. Now, so I've worked on sets before, and I've done indies that have gone 28 days.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're talking one location.
Yeah.
It's just, that's not a great example. This is a under $20 million movie that had to finish in a little over 5 weeks. That's nothing for the amount of locations they were at. They had Dennis Miller for 1 day. They just put 3 cameras on him. So Denny admitted to scenes where 1-2 takes. So that poop thing was 1 take. The hot dog was a couple more because they had to clean him off and do more. Like they had to bash him from different angles because the camera would have caught him. But I think that was the one that took more angles because they had no time. They had no money. They wanted to go to the Grand Canyon. They didn't have enough money for it, so they went to Horseshoe Canyon, Utah. It's just, they went everywhere that was 2 hours from LA to make this movie in 28 days.
That's
crazy.
Really, yeah, and it's really funny that you say that because I saw something after I watched it and I was looking into it that with that amount of time they had one big setback for one particular scene. They were the two Joe's parents. It was actually supposed to be Roseanne Barr and Gary Busey, which is nuts. And when I read that, I was just like I was trying to imagine it in my head. And the one question that I came up with was Busey gonna don the mullet? And if that was so, I really want to see that. Like how different that scene would have been, even if it was just Busey that was in it. Like that would have been worth the price of admission anyways. But what I saw is that Roseanne, like, basically delayed them for like almost a full week before she completely just like dropped out off the face of the planet and forced them to recast. And with you saying they only had 28 days, I was like, wow, what a big pain in the butt. Like what a like kind of a-hole move.
Yeah, nightmare.
That they had. That was crazy. But it also, I noticed.
Well, they brought in Fred Ward, our homeboy.
Exactly.
Trevor's.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was funny and once I read that, something clicked in my brain. So when I was watching it for Spade in particular, with like how he looked and how the wig was set up, he just looked different. Like the facial hair was or everything. So if they were like moving along at a steady pace and trying to get things going, and then there was a block of time where they couldn't do this scene with him and they had to like recreate and like get him back into his white trash, facial hair, that could have definitely been something that, took away a little bit from that scene for me, just because I was like, oh, something looks off, know?
And sometimes he has stubble when he's only supposed to grow hair in certain spots. It's just, that's what happens.
Like that, yeah.
And you know what's interesting? The director, she said something really funny. She's like, I couldn't really focus on filmmaking because I had to focus on the joke, and we didn't have much time. So this is I did a So I Married an Axe Murderer episode, and Mike Myers and the director had huge fights on the set because the director wanted to use a dolly, or he wanted to use like different motion. He wanted to make it look more theatrical. But Mike Myers just said, no, 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 no. You know, they say, like the camera should, when someone's telling a joke in a movie, you should always have both eyes on the camera. So if you're shooting a dolly shot where people are walking, you don't have both eyes on the joke. So I think they just had to hurry. I think sometimes they forgot about continuity. Those three ladies, the college girls that are listening, they had the same clothes for 3 days. And it's just, they had no time.
Yeah.
And so, and you know what's interesting? Spade and the writer paid for Chris Walken to come act on set. So in the commentary, he's like, yeah, Pascal wouldn't pay for Walken, so we just paid for him. But then they saw the dailies, and Amy Pascal, that the head of the studio, paid him back.
Oh, that's good. That was something that I wondered too, as I was like, you know, this has a great cast with everyone in it, but you know, it's always that, you know, almost any movie that he's in, they're like, how did they get Walken? Like, what was the thing that brought him in? And then I thought about it that, you know, how many times did he host SNL? And he had to have developed those relationships, even if, you know, not just with Lorne Michaels, but probably the rest of the cast. And so I'm sure they had a little bit of an in with him just at the get-go to be like, hey, we're doing this movie. Because then he shows up in things like, you know, Click with Adam Sandler and other, you know, other SNL members that maybe he just, you know, you know, it's nostalgic for him doing the shows because, you know, just watching him doing like the Continental and things like that, like he's having such a good time, or the Cowbell, just whatever that, you know, he would probably jump to do things like that again.
Yeah, and also was probably on set for a couple days.
Yeah.
They probably one or two taked him. He got his dancing in. And it's a fun gimmick. He's a janitor and Walken saves everybody, but then he's wanted, and then he changes his name to Gert B. Frobe, which is Clem the Gert, which is the best name ever. He was actually a Bond villain, and then Walken was one too. But yeah, they just paid him. I think they reached out to him. They wrote a nice letter, and Spade went into his wallet to bring him in. But that pays off because you're watching The Animal. So I looked at other 2001 movies, and I was thinking about the ones that have sort of become cult classics. You have Super Troopers. We have Brian Cox in there.
God.
Right?
He makes any movie better. Like, I just, if there's a movie that I have no desire to see whatsoever, and they're like, oh, Brian Cox is in it, I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. You know?
You got him in there. I mean, it's just, I think it's, Out Cold I still love, but they brought in, the $6 million man? Crap, what's his name?
Oh goodness, Lee Majors.
No. Yeah, they brought in Lee Majors.
I was going to say Steve Austin, but like, no, that is the
Stone Cold.
Yeah.
But it's, I guess the point, all right, so also too, Jamie Presley's legit funny. She's, in My Name is Earl.
Oh yeah, she's hilarious.
She's like Golden Globe Emmy nominated, not for an accident. She's hilarious. You got Adam Beach, who was in Smoke Signals, the hot guy from Smoke. That's why I love that they called him too. Chris Walken, Dennis Miller, Brittany Daniel. She's been acting for a really long time. Even little Joe Dirt, that kid was in Malcolm in the Middle.
And I had completely forgotten that Rosanna Arquette was in it until it showed up in Alligators. And I was like, holy crap, I forgot that she was in it.
Yeah, and just the tiny role, like Fred Ward just randomly popping up. So I think it's a weird one, man. It's like, do you want to be in this movie about this guy named Joe Dirt who wanders around the country and eats off poop? And yeah, sure. And then they have this cast.
Do you think they just had like a concept or like just a headshot of Spade in the mullet? That they were just like, what's the movie about? And they just like showed it to people, and they just like probably laughed. I was like, I gotta be in this. I don't care what it's about. I get to see that every day. I'm sold. Let's do it.
What if it's like Forrest Gump, but with Joe Dirt. And also,
and minimal running. There's hardly any running, so there's that too.
And his running is bad in it on purpose too.
Yeah. Man, yeah, that's yeah.
We're all over the place with this movie, but it's comedy is hard to talk about because when you're talking about a comedy, you can fall into these traps of I love this gag, I love that gag, this is a good gag, this is you know what I mean? that's why I think that's why I think it's so interesting to explore why this movie works. Because, like, so the 2001 comedies that came Out Cold, Not Another Teen Movie, Super Troopers, Saving Silverman, Tomcats, Joe Dirt, Freddy Got Fingered, oof. The Animal, Rob Schneider turns into an animal. Like, and he's such a, you know what's interesting too is, I'm so tired of these sad sack movies where the main character is just a wet towel of a human, but then they become a gigolo or something happens and then they become cool. Then they also had American Pie 2, Bubble Boy, geez Louise, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which is fun, Black Knight, Shallow Hal, and How High. But then, and I also looked at other ones. Evolution, beautiful. Legally Blonde, great. Heartbreakers, funny. Mm-hmm. Ghost World, love that movie. Rat Race. I haven't watched Rat Race in 15 years, but I remember loving it.
Yeah, it's been a while. I remember bits and pieces, mostly Rowan Atkinson. I remember most of Rowan Atkinson in that
and the
movie.
Heart. And then the tower scene where the car's chasing the two brothers up the tower. I remember that being a good bit.
Oh, yeah.
Seth Green and the guy. And then but a couple more. Wet Hot American Summer, Zoolander, Royal Tenenbaums, and Amelie. So this is a really weird year for comedies. You have Royal Tenenbaums, Bubble Boy. You have Ghost World, Tomcats. It's a weird jumbling.
And just the concepts for all of them. I mean, even just like look at Zoolander in itself. Like they were like definitely kind of, going out there and kind of swinging for the fences on these kind of off the wall goofball concepts. But, and it's funny how, it's either a big win, even if it's just like, again, becomes a cult classic and the audience loves it, but the critics hate it. I know you mentioned Ebert. This was on his like most hated list. I remember seeing that it was like his most hated movie. I was like, really? Like, I mean, if you don't like, hate's such a strong word. I say it to my kids all the time. Like, I hate it. And like, that's a strong word, kiddo. And even me, like, it takes a lot for me to say I hate something. But yeah, it's like, it's for those like really like weird pitches. Like it's either like it's going to do great and love it. Like you got Zoolander, like you have Joe Dirt and, things like that, or it's going to be a complete disaster. Like, Tom Green at the highest of his career with as goofy and dumb and off the wall and ridiculous as he was, like, we're going to make a movie, and people went to see it just to see what Tom Green would do. And we don't even need to talk about it. We just don't.
Rip Torn and Julie Haggerty, I feel bad for them. They gave their all in that movie. But no, I love what Ebert said though. He wrote, the movie's production notes further inform us Spade says this is the first time he has ever played a character that is likable. It's a big switch for me, he says. I think he may still have his first likable character ahead of him. And they put Joe Dirt is so obviously a construction that it's impossible to find anything human about him. He is a concept, not a person. And although Spade arguably looks better in the mullet wig than he does with his trademark mop top, wow, he still has the same underlying personality. He is the man born to play the Peter Lorre role. I was thinking about this, and there are many movies where characters are simply kind of constructions. It's more about playing. People are going to hate me for saying this, but the Wonder Woman 84, those two characters played by Pedro Pascal and Kristen Wiig, they are just meant to represent no half measures. Like you're taking shortcuts, and so the characters are there. But I think they represent more of an idea of a construction. And people may not like that, but there's so many movies that have been released where the characters are just ideas. Does that make sense? Where they're not. So I don't see a problem. And I guess Joe Dirt is made up of a lot of different parts, but I think he's unique enough where you could warrant calling him an actual character, not just an idea, even though he is an idea.
Yeah, but I think as a very harsh comment to be like, there's nothing human about him, which is what we've been kind of talking about the whole thing, is that he encompasses, like, it could be argued some of the greatest human ideals, like, selflessness and helping other people out and caring and being true to yourself and just all that stuff. So for him to be like, there's nothing human. I mean, is he a caricature? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But like, in comedies, a lot of, people are the leads in comedies can be that they're these, bigger than life or just like kind of, lean into a certain concept. But and it looks better in the mullet than his